Marcus Chen wiped the sweat from his forehead as he finished welding the last support beam on the mining platform. The twin sons of Kepler 442b beat down mercilessly on the construction site, their orange light casting everything in an amber glow. He was the only human on this remote world, working as a structural engineer for the Galactic Mining Consortium. The pay was good, but the isolation was brutal. The other workers were mostly Vectari, a species that looked like tall, slender lizards with iridescent scales. They were efficient workers but kept to themselves. Marcus had been here for 8 months, and most of them still acted like he didn't exist. Humans were considered a minor species in the galaxy, barely worth noticing. The Galactic Council had only granted Earth Associate membership 5 years ago, and most alien species still saw humans as primitive newcomers. Shun. The voice of Supervisor Thexka crackled through his comm unit. Report to Sector 7. Emergency structural assessment needed. Marcus gathered his tools and headed toward the transport pod. Sector 7 was the residential area where the workers lived. As he flew over the sprawling complex, he could see smoke rising from one of the buildings. His stomach dropped when he realized it was the apprentice dormitory. The scene was chaos when he arrived. Vectari workers stood in groups, their scales flickering with stress patterns. Emergency responders were setting up a perimeter, but they seemed hesitant to approach the burning building. Marcus could see why. The structure was old, built with cheaper materials that were now feeding the flames aggressively. "What's the situation?" Marcus asked Thexka. The supervisor's scales were a deep red, indicating extreme agitation. "Building caught fire 20 minutes ago. Most apprentices evacuated, but scanners show one life sign still inside. 3rd floor, East Wing. Why aren't the rescue teams going in?" Thexka's tail lashed nervously. "Structure is compromised. Engineers say it could collapse any moment. Too dangerous." Marcus looked at the building with his trained eye. The fire had weakened the support structure, but the main load-bearing walls were still intact. The building was definitely unsafe, but not immediately critical. He'd worked on dozens of damaged structures during his time in the Earth Emergency Corps before joining the mining consortium. "I can get them out," Marcus said. "Absolutely not. You're not trained for rescue operations. I spent 3 years doing urban search and rescue on Earth. I know building collapse patterns better than anyone here." Thexka's scales shifted to a skeptical purple. "This is not Earth architecture, human. You don't understand Vectari construction methods." Marcus studied the building again. The basic principles were the same: load distribution, stress points, material fatigue. Physics worked the same way everywhere in the universe. The fire is spreading fast. By the time specialized rescue arrives, whoever's in there will be dead. Before Thexka could stop him, Marcus grabbed a breathing mask and emergency kit from the rescue station. He sprinted toward the building, ignoring the shouts behind him. The heat hit him like a wall as he approached the entrance. The main doors were blocked by debris, but he spotted a service entrance on the side that was still accessible. Inside, the smoke was thick and acrid. Marcus activated his breathing mask and pulled out a handheld scanner. The device had been modified to detect Vectari life signs. He followed the readings toward the stairwell, carefully testing each step before putting his full weight on it. The building groaned around him, metal supports expanding and contracting in the heat. On the 2nd floor, part of the ceiling had already collapsed, blocking the main corridor. Marcus found an alternate route through what looked like a common room, stepping carefully over burning debris. The life sign was stronger now, coming from somewhere ahead on the 3rd floor. As he climbed the stairs, Marcus noticed something odd about the readings. The signature was different from the other Vectari workers he'd scanned. Smaller, with a different metabolic pattern. The East Wing was a maze of small rooms connected by narrow hallways. The fire hadn't reached this section yet, but smoke was pouring in through the ventilation system. Marcus followed his scanner to a room near the end of the hall. The door was locked. "Hello? Can you hear me?" he called out in standard Galactic. A voice answered from inside, high-pitched and frightened. The words were in a dialect Marcus didn't recognize, but the tone was unmistakably terrified. He examined the lock, a simple electronic system that had probably malfunctioned due to the heat. Marcus pulled out his multi-tool and quickly bypassed the mechanism. The door slid open, revealing a small figure huddled in the corner. Marcus's breath caught in his throat. This wasn't a Vectari. The being was roughly humanoid but shorter, with pale blue skin that seemed to shimmer in the dim light. Large, dark eyes dominated a delicate face framed by silver hair. She was clearly young, probably equivalent to a human teenager. "It's okay," Marcus said softly, switching to simple standard Galactic. "I'm here to help." The girl looked up at him with those enormous eyes, clearly terrified. She said something in her native language, pointing at her leg. Marcus saw that a piece of metal debris had pinned her ankle. He knelt down and carefully lifted the twisted metal away. The girl winced but didn't cry out. Marcus checked her ankle quickly. It was bruised and swollen but didn't seem broken. "Can you walk?" She tried to stand and immediately stumbled. Marcus caught her, surprised by how light she was. The building shook around them, and he could hear the ominous sound of metal supports beginning to fail. "We need to move now," Marcus said. He helped her to her feet, supporting most of her weight. They made their way back toward the stairwell, but when they reached it, Marcus's heart sank. The stairs they had used to reach the third floor were now blocked by fallen debris. The building shuddered again, and Marcus could feel the floor beginning to sag beneath their feet. He scanned the area frantically, looking for another way down. There, a service ladder near the end of the hall, probably used for maintenance access. "This way," he told the girl, guiding her toward the ladder. She was limping badly, but she kept moving without complaint. Marcus was impressed by her determination. The service ladder led to a utility shaft that connected all floors of the building. Marcus tested the ladder carefully, it was still solid. He helped the girl climb down first, staying close behind her in case she fell. The shaft was filled with smoke, making it hard to see, but they made steady progress. On the second floor, they had to detour around a section where the shaft wall had been damaged by the fire. Marcus found a maintenance hatch that opened into a storage room. From there, they could access a freight elevator shaft that would take them to the ground floor. The elevator itself wasn't working, but the emergency ladder along the shaft wall was intact. Marcus went first this time, testing each rung before the girl followed. His muscles burned from the strain of supporting her weight whenever she needed help, but he pushed through the fatigue. They were almost to the ground floor when they heard a thunderous crack from above. Marcus looked up to see the ceiling of the shaft beginning to buckle. "Faster," he urged. The girl pushed herself beyond her limits, ignoring the pain in her injured ankle. They dropped through the bottom hatch of the shaft just as a massive piece of debris crashed down where they had been moments before. Marcus led her through the building's basement toward an emergency exit he had spotted on the building plans. The exit opened into a loading bay on the far side of the building, away from the worst of the fire. They stumbled out into the open air, both gasping for breath. Emergency responders rushed toward them as soon as they emerged. Marcus's legs finally gave out, and he collapsed to his knees on the concrete. The girl sat down beside him, her large eyes filled with gratitude as she looked at him. "You saved my life," she said in heavily accented standard Galactic. Before Marcus could respond, Supervisor Thexka and a medical team reached them. The medics immediately began checking them both for injuries while Thexka demanded to know what had happened. "Building was more stable than you thought," Marcus gasped, still catching his breath. "Main supports held long enough to get out safely." "This is Zara Lynn," one of the medics said, examining the girl. "She's Luminari. What was she doing in a Vectari dormitory?" Marcus looked at the girl, Zara Lynn, with new interest. He had heard of the Luminari but had never seen one. They were supposedly one of the most advanced species in the galaxy, masters of energy manipulation and exotic physics. But this girl looked so young and vulnerable. "Exchange program," Thexka explained. "She's been studying Vectari mining techniques for the past month." Must have been trapped when the fire started. The medical team pronounced them both healthy apart from smoke inhalation and Zaralin's bruised ankle. As they were being treated, Marcus noticed a group of beings approaching. They moved with an elegant grace that reminded him of dancers, and their clothing was unlike anything he had seen before. It seemed to shift and flow like liquid light. "The Luminary delegation," Thexka said quietly. "They've been looking for her." The leader of the group was tall and regal, with the same shimmering skin as Zaralin but with an aura of considerable authority. When he saw the girl, relief flooded his features. They spoke rapidly in the Luminary language, their voices creating harmonies that were almost musical. Zaralin gestured toward Marcus several times during the conversation. The older Luminary looked at him with new interest, studying him as if seeing a human for the first time. Marcus felt uncomfortable under the scrutiny but maintained eye contact respectfully. Finally, the leader approached Marcus. "I am Ambassador Veltar of the Luminary High Council," he said in perfect standard Galactic. "You saved my daughter's life." Marcus blinked in surprise. "Daughter?" That meant Zaralin was not just any Luminary but apparently someone very important. "I just did what anyone would do," he said. "No," Veltar said firmly. "You did what no one else was willing to do. The other workers stood by while my daughter faced death. Only you acted." Marcus glanced around and realized that the ambassador was right. Dozens of beings had been standing around when he ran into the building, but none of them had been willing to risk themselves for one person. It made him feel uncomfortable to be singled out for basic decency. "I have some experience with structural rescue," Marcus said. "I could assess the building's stability better than most." Veltar's expression suggested he wasn't buying the modest explanation. "Perhaps. But experience means nothing without courage. You risked your life for someone you had never met, someone of a different species. This is not common in our galaxy." Marcus wasn't sure how to respond to that. The ambassador continued studying him with those intense, luminous eyes. Finally, he said, "We will not forget this debt. The Luminary always honor their obligations." Before Marcus could ask what that meant, Veltar and his delegation escorted Zaralin away. She looked back once, giving Marcus a small wave that somehow conveyed more gratitude than words could express. As the excitement died down and the crowd dispersed, Marcus found himself sitting alone on a bench near the emergency station. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving him exhausted. He watched the firefighting crews work to contain the blaze, thinking about what had just happened. Thexka approached him, scales now showing a more neutral color. "Structural integrity report?" he asked. Marcus pulled out his scanner and reviewed the data he had collected during the rescue. "Building will be a total loss," he said. "Fire damage is too extensive to repair economically." But the collapse risk was overestimated. Main supports could have held for another hour at least. Thexka made notes on his datapad. "Your assessment may have saved lives. If the building had collapsed during evacuation." "Just doing my job," Marcus said. "This was not your job," Thexka replied. "Your job is to build mining platforms, not rescue trapped apprentices. What you did today was..." The supervisor paused, searching for words. "Unexpected." Marcus went back to his quarters that night feeling emotionally drained. His small apartment felt even more isolated than usual. He prepared a simple meal and sat by the window, looking out at the alien landscape. The twin suns were setting, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. He thought about Zaralin's eyes, so full of fear and, then, gratitude. He thought about Ambassador Veltar's words about debt and obligations. Most of all, he thought about what the supervisor had said, that his actions were unexpected. Was basic human decency really so unusual in the galaxy? Marcus had grown up believing that helping others was just what people did. His parents had been emergency responders, and he had been raised with the idea that you didn't stand by when someone needed help. But, apparently that wasn't a universal value. His comm unit chimed with an incoming message. Marcus expected it to be a routine work update, but the sender ID made him sit up straight. The message was from the Luminary Embassy. Mr. Chen, the message began, Ambassador Veltar requests your presence at the embassy tomorrow at 1400 hours. Transportation will be provided. This matter relates to today's events. Marcus stared at the message, wondering what the ambassador could want. He had said something about the Luminary honoring their obligations. Was this about some kind of formal recognition? Marcus hoped not. He had no interest in being turned into a symbol or propaganda tool. But he was curious about the Luminary. They were supposedly one of the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy, masters of technology that seemed almost magical to other species. What could they possibly want with a human engineer from Earth? As he prepared for bed, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that his life was about to change in ways he couldn't imagine. Saving Zara Lynn had felt like the right thing to do in the moment, but now he was beginning to realize that the consequences might extend far beyond a simple rescue operation. The last thing he saw before falling asleep was the alien stars through his window, their unfamiliar patterns reminding him how far he was from home. Tomorrow, he would learn what it meant to have earned the gratitude of the Luminary. Something told him it would be more significant than he could possibly anticipate. Outside, the mining complex settled into its night routine, but, in the diplomatic quarter, lights burned late into the night as urgent messages flowed between the Luminary Embassy and distant worlds. The rescue of one young Luminary by a human engineer was creating ripples that would soon reach the highest levels of galactic politics. Marcus Chen, exhausted from his heroic actions, slept peacefully, unaware that he had just altered the course of his entire species' future in the galaxy. Marcus arrived at the Luminary Embassy exactly on time, still unsure what to expect. The building was unlike anything else on Kepler 442b, its walls seemed to be made of crystalline material that captured and refracted light in impossible ways. As he approached the entrance, the doors opened silently, revealing an interior that defied conventional architecture. The floors appeared to be pools of liquid light, solid to walk on but constantly shifting in color and pattern. The walls curved and flowed like frozen waves, and the ceiling was transparent, offering a view of what looked like another dimension filled with slowly drifting geometric shapes. "Welcome, Marcus Chen," a voice said behind him. He turned to see Ambassador Veltar approaching, dressed in robes that seemed to be woven from starlight itself. "Thank you for coming. Thank you for inviting me, Ambassador. Your embassy is remarkable." Veltar smiled, an expression that somehow made his already luminous features even brighter. "We shape our environment to reflect our inner nature. Come, there are others who wish to meet you." As they walked deeper into the embassy, Marcus noticed that the building seemed much larger inside than it had appeared from the outside. The ambassador noticed his confusion. "Space is more flexible than most species realize," Veltar explained casually. "We have learned to encourage it to be more accommodating to our needs." They entered a circular chamber where several Luminary were waiting. Marcus recognized the elegant, flowing movements and the way their clothing seemed to respond to their emotions, shifting colors and patterns continuously. But what struck him most was the way they were all looking at him, with an intensity that made him feel like a specimen under a microscope. "These are members of our High Council," Veltar said. "Counselor Lyranthe, Counselor Morveth, and Counselor Zephyra. They wished to meet the human who saved my daughter." Each counselor stepped forward in turn, offering what Marcus assumed was a traditional greeting, placing their hands together and bowing slightly while their skin displayed complex patterns of light. Marcus tried to mirror the gesture, feeling clumsy compared to their natural grace. "Tell us, Marcus Chen," Counselor Lyranthe said, her voice carrying the same musical quality he had noticed in all Luminary speech, "what drove you to risk your life for someone you had never met?" Marcus was taken aback by the directness of the question. She was in danger. Someone had to help her." "But why you?" Counselor Morveth pressed. "There were dozens of others present. Why did you alone act?" "I had the skills necessary to assess the building's stability. I knew I could reach her safely." "Others had similar skills," Counselor Zephyra observed. "The emergency response team included structural engineers. Yet they declared the situation too dangerous and chose to wait for specialized equipment." Marcus found himself getting frustrated with the questioning. Look, I don't know why the others didn't act. I just saw someone who needed help and I helped. That's what you do when someone's in trouble. The counselors exchanged glances, and Marcus caught a rapid series of light patterns flickering across their skin. He had the feeling they were communicating without words, discussing something significant about his responses. That's what you do, Lyran, they repeated slowly. This is interesting. You speak as if your actions were inevitable, as if you had no choice in the matter. I could have chosen not to help, Marcus said. But that wouldn't have been right. According to whose moral framework? Morveth asked. According to, I don't know, basic decency? Universal ethics? More flickering light patterns between the counselors. Finally, Veltar spoke up. Marcus, may I ask about your background? What did you do before joining the mining consortium? Marcus gave them a brief overview of his career, his engineering studies on Earth, his 3 years with the Earth Emergency Corps doing urban search and rescue, his decision to take a mining position to see the galaxy and earn enough money to start his own engineering firm back home. Emergency response, Zephyra mused. So this type of situation is familiar to you. The specifics were different, but, yes. I've been in burning buildings before, pulled people out of collapsed structures. It's part of the job. And, you enjoyed this work? Lyran, they asked. Marcus considered the question. I wouldn't say I enjoyed seeing people in danger. But, I liked being able to help, knowing that my skills could make the difference between someone living or dying. There's satisfaction in that. Even when it put you at personal risk? The risk is part of it. If there was no risk, people wouldn't need rescuing. You train to minimize the dangers, but you can't eliminate them entirely. The counselors were quiet for a long moment, their skin patterns becoming more complex and rapid. Finally, Veltar cleared his throat. Marcus, we asked you here because we want to offer you something. A position, an opportunity that we believe would benefit both you and our people. What kind of position? To begin with, let me explain something about Luminari society, Veltar said, gesturing for Marcus to sit in what appeared to be a chair made of crystallized light but proved to be perfectly comfortable. We are, as you may know, considered one of the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. Our mastery of energy manipulation, dimensional engineering, and quantum mechanics has given us capabilities that seem miraculous to other species. Marcus nodded, looking around at the impossible architecture of the embassy as a reminder of their abilities. However, Veltar continued, our advancement has come at a cost. We have become a society of theorists and researchers. We explore the universe through mathematics and energy manipulation, but we have lost something in the process. What have you lost? Marcus asked. The willingness to take personal risks for others, Counselor Lyran, they said quietly. Physical courage. The instinct to act rather than analyze. Marcus felt a chill of understanding. You're saying that yesterday, if the situation had been reversed, if I was trapped and Zaralyn had been outside, she wouldn't have come to rescue me? She would have wanted to, Veltar said sadly. She would have felt the moral obligation. But, she would have been paralyzed by analysis. She would have calculated risk factors, consulted protocols, attempted to find a safer alternative. By the time she acted, you would have been dead. This has become a species-wide problem, Morveth added. We can reshape reality with our minds, but we cannot bring ourselves to charge into a burning building. We have evolved beyond the primitive responses that once kept our ancestors alive. We are not alone in this, Zephyra said. Most advanced species in the galaxy have experienced similar psychological evolution. Physical courage becomes less necessary as technology advances, so natural selection gradually eliminates it from the gene pool. What you demonstrated yesterday is increasingly rare in galactic society. Marcus absorbed this information, thinking about the implications. So you're saying that humans are unusual because we still retain these primitive instincts? More than unusual, Veltar said. Precious. Your species has achieved interstellar travel and sophisticated technology while retaining the psychological traits that drove your ancestors to fight predators and rescue tribe members from dangerous situations. This combination is exceptionally rare. It makes humans valuable, Lyran, they added. Not just as curiosities, but as partners. You can do things that we cannot, not because you lack our abilities, but because you retain capabilities we have lost. Marcus was beginning to see where this conversation was heading. You want to hire humans as some kind of specialists? We want to hire you, Veltar corrected. Specifically, as a consultant and trainer. Training for what? We want you to teach Luminari young people how to think like humans in crisis situations, Morveth explained. How to act on instinct rather than analysis. How to accept acceptable risks for greater goods. Marcus shook his head. I don't understand. You can't just teach someone to be brave. It's not a skill you can learn from a book. No, Veltar agreed. It requires experiential learning. Field training. Controlled exposure to manageable risks under expert supervision. You want me to set up some kind of training program? We want you to join our cultural exchange initiative, Zephyra said. A program designed to teach Luminari youth the mindset and response patterns that make humans effective in emergency situations. And, in return? Marcus asked. In return, you would have access to Luminari technology and knowledge that no human has ever possessed, Veltar said. Advanced materials science, energy manipulation techniques, dimensional engineering principles. Knowledge that would advance Earth's technological development by centuries. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. The offer was staggering. Access to Luminari technology could revolutionize human civilization. But there was something about the conversation that bothered him. Why me specifically? I'm just one engineer. Surely there are humans with more impressive credentials, military heroes, or professional instructors. Perhaps, Lyran, they said. But they were not the ones who saved my daughter. They were not the ones who demonstrated the exact qualities we need to develop in our people. Also, Morveth added with what might have been a smile, Zaralin specifically requested that we make this offer to you. Before Marcus could respond, a new voice spoke from behind him. I told them that if anyone could teach Luminari to be brave, it would be the person who was brave enough to save me. Marcus turned to see Zaralin entering the chamber. She looked completely recovered from the previous day's ordeal, dressed in the flowing, color-changing garments that seemed standard for Luminari. But her eyes held the same intelligence and determination he had glimpsed during the rescue. Zaralin, Veltar said with obvious paternal pride, I thought you were studying quantum mechanics with Professor Thylandar. I finished early, she said, moving to stand near her father but keeping her gaze on Marcus. I wanted to hear his answer. Marcus looked around the room at the expectant faces. This is a lot to process. Can I have some time to think about it? Of course, Veltar said. This is not a decision to be made hastily. Take as much time as you need. How much time are we talking about? What would this position involve exactly? The initial contract would be for one standard galactic year, Lyran, they explained. You would work with small groups of young Luminari, designing and supervising practical exercises that would develop their crisis response capabilities. It would not be dangerous, Morveth assured him. We're not asking you to put anyone in actual peril. But we need someone who understands the psychology of risk-taking and can create scenarios that challenge our people to move beyond pure analytical thinking. And the knowledge transfer would begin immediately, Zephyra added. You would have access to our technical databases and research facilities as soon as you accept the position. Marcus thought about his current situation, months of isolation on a mining platform, working for supervisors who barely acknowledged his existence. Then, he thought about the opportunity being offered. The chance to work with one of the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy, to gain knowledge that could benefit all of humanity. But there was something else, something he hadn't quite admitted to himself. When he looked at Zaralin, he felt a connection he hadn't experienced in a long time. Her courage in the burning building, her gratitude afterward, and, now her confidence in him, it was affecting him in ways that went beyond professional opportunity. Where would this training take place, he asked. Initially here on Kepler 442b, Veltar said. We have educational facilities that could be adapted for your purposes. Eventually, if the program proves successful, we might expand it to other worlds or even to our home system. And, I would be working with young luminary, people around Zaralin's age? Among others, Lyran, they confirmed. Zaralin has volunteered to be part of the first training group. Marcus caught the girl's eyes and saw a spark of excitement there. She wanted to be part of this program, wanted to learn whatever he could teach her about courage and quick action. The thought of working closely with her was both appealing and intimidating. What about my current job? I have a contract with the mining consortium. We have already spoken with Supervisor Thexka, Morveth said. He is willing to release you from your contract if you choose to accept our offer. In fact, he seemed quite pleased by the possibility of cooperation between the consortium and the Luminari Embassy. Marcus realized that while he had been sleeping, the Luminari had been busy making arrangements. They had clearly put a lot of thought into this offer, which suggested they were serious about its importance. I need to understand something, Marcus said. Why is this so important to your people? You've survived and thrived for thousands of years with your current psychological makeup. Why change now? The counselors exchanged those light pattern communications again. Finally, Veltar answered. Because the galaxy is changing, Marcus. New threats are emerging that cannot be solved through technology alone. Pirates who use primitive tactics specifically designed to exploit the predictable responses of advanced species. Natural disasters that require immediate physical intervention rather than calculated solutions. Political situations that demand personal courage rather than diplomatic finesse. We have realized that our evolution toward pure intellectualism has made us vulnerable, Zaralin added. Yesterday proved that. I was trapped in a situation that required immediate action to resolve, and I was helpless. If you hadn't been there, I would have died despite all our advanced technology and knowledge. Marcus understood now. The Luminari had reached a point where their own advancement was becoming a limitation. They needed to reconnect with more primitive psychological traits in order to remain viable in a galaxy that still contained elements of chaos and danger. This isn't just about training a few young people, is it? Marcus said. You're trying to change your entire species' psychological development. Eventually, perhaps, Veltar admitted. But change must begin somewhere. If we can teach a few individuals to think and act differently, they can become teachers for others. Cultural change happens gradually, person by person. Marcus stood and walked to the window, looking out at the alien landscape. The twin suns were at their peak, bathing everything in that distinctive amber light. He thought about Earth, about his plans to eventually return home and start his own firm. Then, he thought about the opportunity before him. If I accept this position, he said, what guarantees do I have that the knowledge you share will actually benefit humanity, not just me personally? You would be free to transmit any non-military applications to Earth, Lyran, they said. In fact, we would encourage it. A more technologically advanced Earth would be beneficial to galactic stability. And, you trust me to use this knowledge responsibly? You risked your life to save someone you had never met, Zephyra pointed out. That suggests a level of ethical development that we find reassuring. Marcus turned back to face the group. I want to accept, he said slowly. But, I need to set some conditions. Name them, Veltar said. First, I want regular communication with Earth. I want to be able to share appropriate discoveries and innovations immediately, not wait until the contract ends. Agreed. Second, I want to design the training program myself. No interference in my methods, as long as I'm not putting anyone in real danger. Agreed. Third, if this doesn't work out, if I'm not effective at this job, I want the right to terminate the contract without penalties. Agreed. Marcus took a deep breath. Then, yes, I accept your offer. The chamber filled with shifting patterns of light as all the luminari expressed their approval simultaneously. Zaralin's smile was brighter than any bioluminescent display, and Marcus felt a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with the alien suns outside. "Excellent," Veltar said, his voice carrying harmonics of deep satisfaction. "When can you begin?" "Give me a week to wrap up my current projects and transition my responsibilities," Marcus said. "After that, I'm yours." As the formal meeting concluded and the counselors departed, Zaralin approached Marcus. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for saving my life yesterday, and for agreeing to this today." "I should be thanking you," Marcus replied. "This opportunity is beyond anything I could have imagined." "It will be interesting," she said, her eyes sparkling with anticipation. "Learning to think like a human. Learning to be brave like you." Marcus felt a flutter of nervousness. Teaching an advanced alien species to be more human was a daunting responsibility. But, looking at Zaralin's eager expression, he found himself looking forward to the challenge. He had no idea that his acceptance would trigger a cascade of events that would reshape not just Luminary society, but the entire balance of power in the galaxy. All he knew was that his quiet, isolated life on the mining platform was about to become something extraordinary. 2 weeks later, Marcus stood in front of 12 young Luminari in what had once been a conference room but was now his training facility. The embassy staff had transformed the space according to his specifications, removing the flowing, organic architecture in favor of practical human-style furniture and equipment. The walls were now lined with emergency response tools, training mannequins, and monitoring equipment. The students ranged in apparent age from late teens to early 20s, though Marcus had learned that Luminari aging was different enough from humans that appearances could be deceiving. What struck him most was their posture. They sat perfectly straight, hands folded, waiting for instruction with the patience of scholars rather than the eager energy he expected from young people. Zaralin was among them, sitting in the front row. She had traded her formal embassy attire for practical clothes similar to what Marcus wore: sturdy pants, comfortable shirt, boots suitable for physical activity. The other students had done the same, though they still moved with that characteristic Luminari grace that made even casual clothing look elegant. "All right," Marcus began, "before we start with any practical exercises, I want to understand how your minds work. I'm going to describe a scenario, and I want each of you to tell me your immediate reaction." He walked to a whiteboard and sketched a simple diagram. You're walking through a city when you hear screaming from a building across the street. You look up and see someone hanging from a third-floor window, about to fall. What do you do? Hands went up immediately. Marcus pointed to a tall male student named Fyronvel. "I would scan the situation to determine the optimal intervention strategy," Fyronvel said confidently. "First, calculate the person's mass and the distance to the ground to determine potential injury severity. Then, assess available materials in the area that could be configured into a safety net or cushioning system. Finally, contact emergency services while beginning construction of the optimal solution." Several other students nodded in agreement. Marcus sighed internally. This was exactly what Veltar had warned him about. How long would all that take? Marcus asked. Approximately 4 to 7 minutes for full analysis and solution implementation. And how long before the person's grip fails and they fall? That would depend on their grip strength, muscle fatigue rate, and psychological stress factors. Fyronvel, Marcus interrupted gently, "They're going to fall in 30 seconds. Maximum." The young man's bioluminescent skin patterns flickered with confusion. Then, the analysis time is insufficient for an optimal solution. Exactly. Marcus turned to address the whole group. This is the fundamental problem we're here to solve. Your minds are trained to find perfect solutions, but, in emergency situations, perfect solutions don't exist. You have to act on incomplete information, accept suboptimal results, and prioritize speed over precision. A female student named Lyrison raised her hand. But, acting without proper analysis increases the risk of failure. Surely it's better to develop better analysis techniques? Let me answer that with another scenario, Marcus said. He erased the board and drew a new diagram. Building on fire. Child trapped on the second floor. You have a ladder that reaches the first floor and a fire that's spreading fast. Do you wait for a proper ladder, or do you use the one you have and figure out the rest on the way? Use the available ladder, Zaralyn said immediately. Several students looked at her in surprise. Why? Marcus asked. Because the child doesn't have time for us to find a better solution. Sometimes good enough right now is better than perfect too late. Exactly. Marcus felt a surge of hope. At least one of his students was beginning to understand. The human approach to emergencies is based on a fundamental principle: any action is better than no action, as long as it moves you toward the goal. He spent the next hour walking them through basic emergency response psychology. The concept of acceptable risk. The importance of making quick decisions with limited information. The way training and practice could make suboptimal choices feel automatic. Now we're going to try some practical exercises, Marcus announced. Nothing dangerous, just scenarios that will require you to act quickly without overthinking. He had set up a simple obstacle course in the adjoining room, nothing that would hurt anyone, but complex enough to require immediate decisions and physical action. The students filed through, and Marcus watched their responses carefully. Thyronvel approached the first obstacle, a wall about shoulder high with several handholds, and stopped. Marcus could see his skin patterns shifting rapidly as he analyzed the different climbing routes. 30 seconds passed while he calculated optimal hand placement. Time, Marcus called out. In a real emergency, you just died from smoke inhalation. The young man's patterns shifted to what Marcus was learning indicated embarrassment. I was determining the safest approach. The safest approach is speed, Marcus said. Show me what your body wants to do, not what your brain thinks is optimal. Thyronvel tried again, and this time he simply grabbed the most obvious handhold and pulled himself up. It wasn't the most efficient route, but he completed the obstacle in 5 seconds instead of 30. Zaralyn was different. When she reached the wall, she barely paused before scrambling up and over. Her technique wasn't perfect, but it was fast and effective. Marcus noticed that her skin patterns were simpler during physical action, less complex analysis, more direct response. Good, Marcus told her as she landed. You're not overthinking it. It feels strange, she admitted. Like I'm being reckless. You're being decisive. There's a difference. As the morning progressed, Marcus began to see patterns in his students' responses. Most of them had the physical capability to handle the exercises easily. Luminari were naturally agile and coordinated. Their problem was purely psychological. They had been trained from childhood to analyze before acting, to consider all variables before making decisions. During a break, Ambassador Veltar appeared with Counselor Lyran. They observed quietly as the students attempted a team exercise that required coordinated action under time pressure. How are they progressing? Veltar asked Marcus quietly. It's too early to tell definitively, but I'm seeing some promising signs, Marcus replied. Zaralyn is picking it up faster than the others. She seems more willing to trust her instincts. That may be because she has direct experience with emergency situations, Lyran observed. She knows what it feels like when analysis becomes a liability. They watched as the students attempted to navigate a maze while blindfolded, relying on verbal communication with teammates who could see the path. Most of the groups got bogged down in complex instructions and detailed explanations. But Zaralyn's team was moving smoothly through the course, using simple, direct commands. Left 3 steps, stop, right turn, forward, she called to her blindfolded partner. No elaborate descriptions of distances or angles, just practical guidance. She's learning to communicate like a human, Marcus noted with satisfaction. After the session ended and the students departed, Veltar asked Marcus to join him for a private conversation. They walked to a balcony overlooking the training facility, where they could speak without being overheard. I've been receiving reports from other Luminari worlds, Veltar said. Word is spreading about your training program. There is significant interest in expanding the initiative. We've only been doing this for 2 weeks, Marcus protested. It's too early to know if it's really working. Perhaps. But, the mere fact that young luminari are attempting to learn these skills is significant. For centuries, our people have accepted that we were psychologically incapable of rapid physical response. The idea that this limitation could be overcome is revolutionary. Marcus considered this. He hadn't thought about the broader psychological impact of the training beyond his immediate students. But, he was beginning to realize that the program represented more than skill development, it was challenging fundamental assumptions about luminary nature. There's something else, Veltar continued. I've received communication from the Galactic Council. They're aware of our initiative. Is that a problem? Not necessarily. But, it's attracted attention from species who view humans as primitives. They're concerned about what they call psychological regression, the idea that advanced species might deliberately adopt more primitive behavioral patterns. Marcus felt a chill. Are they trying to shut down the program? Not yet. But, they're watching carefully. If our initiative is perceived as successful, it could have implications far beyond luminary society. Other species might want to develop similar programs. And, that would be bad because it would challenge the established order, Veltar said grimly. For thousands of years, galactic civilization has been based on the principle that psychological advancement parallels technological advancement. Species gain influence and status by becoming more analytical, more intellectual, more detached from primitive responses. But, you're saying those primitive responses actually have value. Exactly. And, if that's true, then, humans, who retain those responses naturally, suddenly, become much more valuable than anyone previously realized. Marcus began to understand the larger implications. If his training program succeeded, it wouldn't just change luminary society. It would validate human psychology as something worth emulating rather than something to be outgrown. What does this mean for the program? He asked. It means we need to be very careful about how we proceed, Veltar said. And, it means you may find yourself at the center of galactic politics whether you want to be or not. The next morning, Marcus arrived at the training facility to find Zaralyn waiting for him. She was earlier than the other students, and he could see from her skin patterns that she was agitated about something. Is everything all right? He asked. I've been thinking about yesterday's exercises, she said. About the feeling of acting without complete analysis. It's addictive. Marcus raised an eyebrows. Addictive how? Last night, I was walking back to my quarters when I heard someone call for help. A maintenance worker had injured himself and couldn't move. Instead of analyzing the situation and formulating a response plan, I just ran to help him. That sounds like exactly what you should have done. But, I didn't think about it first, she said, her patterns shifting rapidly. I just acted. And, afterward, I realized I enjoyed it. The feeling of moving without hesitation, of trusting my instincts rather than my analysis. It felt liberating. Marcus studied her carefully. Are you worried that's a bad thing? I don't know. In luminary society, we value careful consideration and thoughtful response. Acting on impulse is seen as primitive, undisciplined. But, when I helped that worker, I felt more alive than I have in years. Zaralyn, let me ask you something. When you helped the injured worker, did you make the situation better or worse? Better, obviously. But, that's not the point. That's exactly the point, Marcus said firmly. The outcome is what matters, not whether your method fits traditional expectations. You helped someone who needed help, and you did it efficiently because you trusted your instincts. Other students began arriving, but Marcus pulled Zaralyn aside. Can you show the others what you felt yesterday? Can you demonstrate that immediate response? You want me to act as an example? I want you to help them understand what it feels like to trust themselves instead of their analysis. You've made the breakthrough I've been hoping for. During that day's session, Marcus set up a more complex scenario. The students entered a room to find what appeared to be a chemical spill emergency, actually just colored water and harmless smoke effects, but realistic enough to trigger their training responses. Most of the students immediately began analyzing the situation. What type of chemical? What safety protocols were required? What equipment was needed? While they discussed and planned, precious time ticked away. But Zaralyn acted immediately. She grabbed emergency breathing masks from the wall and began distributing them to her classmates while moving them toward the exit. She didn't know what the chemical was, but she knew that getting everyone away from potential contamination was the first priority. "Stop," Marcus called out. "Exercise complete." The other students looked around in confusion. They were still in the planning phase of their response. "Zaralyn, explain your actions," Marcus said. "Unknown chemical spill means potential respiratory hazard," she said simply. "First priority is protecting people from exposure while we figure out what we're dealing with. Analysis can happen after everyone is safe." "What if the breathing masks weren't necessary?" Fyrinvel asked. "Then, we wasted 30 seconds putting them on. What if they were necessary and we spent 5 minutes analyzing first?" Fyrinvel's pattern shifted as he processed this logic. "Then, people could have been seriously injured while we planned our response." "Exactly," Marcus said. "In emergency situations, erring on the side of caution while taking immediate action is better than erring on the side of complete analysis while taking no action." Over the following days, Marcus watched his students slowly begin to change their approach to problems. It wasn't easy. Thousands of years of evolutionary psychology couldn't be overcome in a few weeks. But, gradually, they started to trust their first instincts more and their elaborate analytical processes less. Fyrinvel was the most resistant to change, but even he began to show progress. During a rescue simulation where he had to navigate a partially collapsed structure to reach a victim, he initially began calculating structural stress points and optimal routes. But then, Marcus watched him take a deep breath, stop analyzing, and simply move toward the goal by the most obvious path. "It feels wrong," Fyrinvel admitted afterward. "Like I'm being irresponsible." "How long did it take you to reach the victim today?" Marcus asked. 2 minutes, 15 seconds. "How long did it take you on Monday?" 6 minutes, 40 seconds. "And, was your route today actually more dangerous than your analyzed route on Monday?" Fyrinvel considered this carefully. "No. The structure was stable enough to support either approach. So you reached the victim 4.5 minutes faster without any additional risk." "Yes. In a real emergency, that 4.5 minutes could be the difference between life and death." Marcus could see the understanding beginning to dawn in the young man's eyes. The analytical approach wasn't wrong, but it wasn't always optimal either. Sometimes good enough right now was better than perfect too late. As word of the program's success spread through the embassy, Marcus found himself dealing with requests from adult luminari who wanted to observe or participate. Many were scientists and researchers who were intellectually curious about human psychology, but some were showing genuine interest in developing these capabilities themselves. "We may need to expand the program sooner than planned," Veltar told Marcus during one of their regular meetings. "The response has been more positive than we anticipated." "I'm not sure I'm ready for that," Marcus admitted. "I'm still learning how to teach this effectively to the current group." "Perhaps you don't need to handle expansion alone," Veltar suggested. "Zaralyn has been demonstrating remarkable progress. She might be ready to begin assisting with instruction." Marcus thought about this idea. Zaralyn had indeed made exceptional progress, and she had a natural talent for explaining concepts to her fellow luminari in terms they could understand. Having her as an assistant instructor might actually improve the program's effectiveness. "I'd like to discuss that with her," Marcus said. That evening, he found Zaralyn in the embassy's library, studying human emergency response procedures on her own time. Her dedication to learning was impressive, but Marcus was also pleased to see that she was taking initiative rather than waiting for formal instruction. "Veltar suggested you might be interested in helping teach other students," Marcus said, sitting down across from her. Her skin patterns lit up with excitement. "Really? You think I'm ready for that?" I think you might be better at it than I am, in some ways. You understand both the luminary mindset and the human approach. You can bridge that gap in ways I can't. What would I be teaching them? The same things I've been teaching you. But, from the perspective of someone who has actually made the transition from pure analysis to intuitive action. Zara Lynn was quiet for a moment, her pattern shifting in what Marcus had learned indicated deep thought. There's something I should tell you, she said finally. Yesterday, when I was helping with that maintenance worker, other luminari saw me acting without analysis. Some of them were disturbed by it. Disturbed how? They said I was behaving like a primitive, abandoning the intellectual development that defines our species. They questioned whether this training program was actually beneficial or if it was corrupting our natural evolution. Marcus felt a knot form in his stomach. He had been so focused on the technical aspects of the training that he hadn't fully considered the cultural resistance it might encounter. What did you tell them? I told them that sometimes being primitive is more useful than being advanced, Zara Lynn said with a slight smile. I said that saving the maintenance worker's life was more important than maintaining perfect philosophical consistency. And their response? Mixed. Some agreed with me. Others seemed to think I had been psychologically compromised by human influence. Marcus realized that the program was approaching a critical juncture. Its success was creating exactly the kind of cultural tension that Veltar had warned him about. The question was whether Luminary society was ready to embrace what his students were learning, or whether traditional attitudes would reassert themselves and shut down the initiative. Zara Lynn, Marcus said seriously, if this program becomes controversial, if there's pressure to stop it, what will you do? Continue, she said without hesitation. What I've learned here isn't just useful skills. It's changed how I think about myself and what I'm capable of. I can't go back to being the person who would have died in that fire because I was too paralyzed by analysis to save myself. Looking at her determined expression, Marcus felt a surge of pride mixed with concern. She had indeed been transformed by the training, but that transformation was making her an outsider in her own society. He wondered if he was helping her grow or if he was inadvertently isolating her from her own people. Only time would tell whether the changes they were creating would spread through Luminary society or whether they would be rejected as dangerous deviations from normal development. Either way, Marcus realized that there was no turning back. The program had already changed the lives of his students in ways that couldn't be undone, and those changes were about to ripple outward into the broader galaxy. 3 months into the program, Marcus received an urgent summons to Ambassador Veltar's office. The tone of the message was formal and serious, unlike their usual friendly communications. When Marcus arrived, he found not just Veltar but also the 3 counselors, along with several luminari he didn't recognize. Marcus, thank you for coming, Veltar said, his usual warmth replaced by diplomatic formality. I'd like you to meet High Counselor Ether Lynn from our homeworld, and her advisors. The new arrivals were clearly high-ranking officials, their clothing more elaborate than anything Marcus had seen before. Their skin patterns were complex and constantly shifting, suggesting either deep thought or significant agitation. Mr. Chen, High Counselor Ether Lynn said, her voice carrying harmonics that seemed designed to command attention. We have come to evaluate your training program personally. I welcome your interest, High Counselor, Marcus replied, trying to match her formal tone. Interest is one word for it, she said coolly. Concern might be more accurate. We have received troubling reports about the psychological effects your program is having on our young people. Marcus glanced at Veltar, who gave him an almost imperceptible nod of encouragement. What kind of effects? Reckless behavior. Abandonment of proper analytical protocols. Actions taken without sufficient consideration of consequences. One of her advisors consulted a data tablet. 3 separate incidents in the past month where program participants have acted in ways that would have been unthinkable before your training. Could you be more specific? A young engineer named Thironvel intervened in a construction accident without following safety procedures, the advisor read. He pulled an injured worker to safety instead of waiting for properly equipped rescue personnel. Marcus felt a flash of pride. Thirenvel had been one of his most analytical students, the one most resistant to acting on instinct. Was the worker saved? That's not the point, Etherlyn said sharply. The point is that he violated established protocols and put himself at unnecessary risk. What would have happened if he had followed proper protocols? The advisor consulted his tablet again. Rescue personnel would have arrived approximately 12 minutes later. And the worker's condition? Severe internal bleeding. Medical analysis suggests he would have died from his injuries if Thirenvel had not intervened. Marcus tried to keep his expression neutral. So Thirenvel saved a man's life by acting quickly instead of following protocols. He violated safety procedures, Etherlyn repeated. The fact that the outcome was positive doesn't justify the abandonment of proper analytical thinking. High Counselor, Veltar interjected diplomatically, perhaps we should observe the training program in action before making final judgments about its value. Very well, Etherlyn agreed. We will observe today's session. Marcus led the delegation to the training facility, feeling increasingly uncomfortable with their disapproving attitude. His students were already assembled, preparing for an advanced exercise he had designed to test their ability to coordinate rapid response under pressure. Today we're going to simulate a multi-casualty emergency, Marcus announced to his students, trying to project confidence despite the scrutinizing presence of the High Counselors. You'll be working in teams to rescue multiple victims from a collapsed structure. He had spent weeks designing this exercise, creating a scenario complex enough to require both quick thinking and coordinated action. The collapsed structure was actually a carefully engineered obstacle course with multiple levels and hidden passages, but it looked convincingly dangerous. Remember, Marcus told his students, your primary goal is to reach all the victims as quickly as possible. Don't overthink the approach, trust your training and work together. The exercise began, and Marcus watched with satisfaction as his students immediately split into efficient teams without discussion. Zaralin took charge of one group, directing them toward the upper level where scanner readings indicated trapped victims. Thirenvel led another team through the ground floor, moving confidently through the maze of obstacles. What impressed Marcus most was their communication. Instead of the elaborate, analytical discussions that had characterized their early training, they were using short, direct commands and acknowledgments. Left passage blocked, take right. 2 victims here, need medical kit. Team 3, cover the back exit. Behind him, Marcus could hear the High Counselors murmuring among themselves in rapid luminari. Their skin patterns were shifting rapidly, and he could sense their growing agitation as they watched the exercise unfold. Zaralin's team reached their first victim, a training mannequin programmed to respond as if injured but conscious. Instead of stopping to analyze the injuries, she immediately began extraction procedures while one of her teammates established communication and another prepared medical supplies. Victim conscious, probable leg fracture, minor respiratory distress, she reported efficiently. Beginning extraction to safe zone. The High Counselor's murmuring grew louder. One of the advisors was taking detailed notes, and Marcus could see disapproval in their body language. The exercise concluded with all victims successfully extracted in under 20 minutes, a time that would have been impossible using traditional luminary analytical methods. Marcus's students gathered around him, their skin patterns glowing with satisfaction and achievement. Excellent work, everyone, Marcus said. Your coordination and speed have improved dramatically. It felt natural, Thirenvel said, still breathing hard from the physical exertion. Like my body knew what to do without my mind having to figure it out first. That's exactly the goal, Marcus replied. Training your instincts so that correct responses become automatic. Automatic responses, High Counselor Etherlyn said, stepping forward. Without conscious thought or analysis. The students turned to look at her, suddenly, aware that they were being evaluated by the highest levels of luminary authority. Mr. Chen, Etherlyn continued, may we speak privately? They returned to Veltar's office, where the High Counselor's demeanor had shifted from cool disapproval to something approaching hostility. What I witnessed today confirms our worst fears, she began. You are systematically training our young people to abandon the intellectual processes that define our species. I'm training them to respond effectively to emergencies, Marcus replied. Situations where analytical processes are counterproductive. There are no situations where analysis is counterproductive, one of her advisors declared. Only situations where our analytical methods need improvement. With respect, Marcus said, struggling to maintain his composure, that's demonstrably false. In time-critical emergencies, the delay caused by analysis can be fatal. Your own rescue protocols acknowledge this. Our protocols were developed by experts over centuries of experience, Etherlin said. They account for all relevant variables and ensure optimal outcomes. They also ensure that people die while rescuers calculate optimal approaches, Marcus shot back. How many Luminari have died in emergencies because responders were too paralyzed by analysis to act? The room fell silent. Marcus realized he had pushed too hard, but he was frustrated by their willful blindness to the obvious benefits of the training. You are teaching our young people to think like primitives, Etherlin said coldly. To abandon the intellectual advancement that took our species millennia to achieve. I'm teaching them to think like humans, Marcus corrected. To use the full range of cognitive tools available, not just the ones you consider socially acceptable. The same thing, one of the advisors muttered. Marcus felt a surge of anger, but before he could respond, Zaralin's voice came from the doorway. With permission, High Counselor, I disagree. Everyone turned to see her standing in the entrance, her posture respectful but her skin pattern showing determined resolution. Zaralin, Veltar said quickly, this is a private meeting, let her speak, Etherlin said, her tone suggesting she expected the girl to support traditional views. Zaralin stepped into the room, moving with the confident grace that Marcus had noticed developing in all his successful students. I was trapped in a burning building 3 months ago, she began. I had all the analytical training our species could provide. I knew exactly how to calculate structural stress, how to evaluate escape routes, how to optimize resource allocation. And, because of that training, I was going to die. Zaralin, Veltar started. I was going to die, she repeated firmly, because I couldn't stop analyzing long enough to act. I knew the building was unstable, but I kept trying to find the perfect solution instead of using the adequate solution that was available. She turned to face Etherlin directly. Marcus didn't teach me to think like a primitive. He taught me to think like someone who values results over perfect methodology. When Thyronvel saved that construction worker, he didn't abandon analysis, he prioritized it appropriately. Quick assessment, immediate action, detailed analysis after the crisis passes. And if his quick assessment had been wrong, one of the advisors challenged. Then, he would have adjusted and tried something else, Zaralin replied. Instead of spending 12 minutes calculating while someone bled to death. Marcus watched the exchange with growing admiration for his student. She was articulating the program's philosophy better than he could, and she was doing it as a Luminari speaking to other Luminari. The training hasn't made me less intelligent, Zaralin continued. It's made me more complete. I can still analyze complex problems when I have time, but I can also act decisively when time is limited. Why should these capabilities be mutually exclusive? High Counselor Etherlin was quiet for a long moment, her skin patterns cycling through complex configurations. Finally, she spoke. Because our entire social structure is based on the principle that advanced beings think before they act. If we abandon that principle, what separates us from any other species in the galaxy? The ability to choose which approach is appropriate for each situation, Zaralin said without hesitation. That's a higher form of intelligence, not a lower one. The silence that followed was profound. Marcus could see that Zaralin's argument was having an impact, but he also sensed the deep resistance from the High Counselor and her advisors. We will need to consider this matter carefully, Etherlin finally said. The implications are significant. After the delegation departed, Marcus found himself alone with Veltar and the original counselors. That was well argued, Lyran, they said approvingly. Both by you and by Zaralin. Will it make any difference? Marcus asked. Hard to say, Veltar replied. Etherlin is conservative, but she's not unreasonable. The fact that she didn't shut down the program immediately is encouraging. What happens if she decides the program is too dangerous? Then, we have a problem, Morveth said grimly. The High Council has the authority to override embassy decisions if they believe galactic security is at stake. Galactic security? Marcus was confused. Think about it from their perspective, Zephyra explained. If this training proves effective, other species will want similar programs. Humans will suddenly be seen as teachers rather than students. The entire hierarchy of galactic civilization could be disrupted. Marcus felt a chill as he realized the scope of what they were dealing with. His simple training program had become a political issue with implications for humanity's place in galactic society. There's something else you should know, Veltar said quietly. We've received intelligence that other species are already inquiring about human psychological training. The Zephyrians have formally requested information about primitive response protocols, and the hegemony has dispatched observers to study human behavior. What does that mean for my students? It means they may become the first representatives of a new type of being, Lyran, they said. Luminari with human-style psychological capabilities. If the program succeeds, they could be the prototype for a new stage in our species' development. Marcus thought about his 12 students, young people who had trusted him enough to challenge everything they had been taught about proper thinking and behavior. The weight of responsibility was suddenly overwhelming. And, if the program fails, he asked. Then, they become outcasts in their own society, Veltar said sadly. Too changed to fit traditional Luminari culture, too few to create their own. That evening, Marcus walked through the embassy gardens, trying to process everything that had happened. The crystalline plants responded to his presence with subtle shifts in luminosity, creating patterns that would have been beautiful under other circumstances. He found Zaralyn sitting by a fountain that seemed to be made of flowing light. She looked up as he approached, her expression thoughtful. Regrets, she asked. About what? Teaching us to think like humans. Creating problems for your students and complications for galactic politics. Marcus sat down beside her. Do you have regrets? No, she said immediately. Whatever happens, I'm more myself now than I was before. I can think and act and choose how to respond instead of being limited to one mode of thinking. Even if it makes you an outsider in Luminari society? Even then, She was quiet for a moment. Marcus, can I ask you something? Of course. If humans had the choice to become purely analytical like traditional Luminari, would you take it? Marcus considered the question. Some humans probably would. But, I think most wouldn't. We value the ability to feel as well as think, to act as well as analyze. Then, why do so many galactic species consider human psychology primitive? Because it's messy and unpredictable. Analytical thinking feels safer, more controlled. But, life isn't always safe or controlled. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the light patterns play across the garden. Finally, Zaralyn spoke again. Tomorrow, High Counselor Etherlyn wants to interview each of us privately. She's going to ask if we want to continue the program or return to traditional training. What will you tell her? That I choose to be complete rather than just advanced. Zaralyn's skin patterns were steady, showing calm resolve. What about the others? I don't know, Marcus admitted. The pressure to conform is strong. Not everyone may be willing to stand against it. Then, we'll find out who we really are, Zaralyn said. Whether we've truly learned to think like humans, or whether we were just playing at being brave. As Marcus walked back to his quarters, he realized that the next day would determine not just the fate of the program, but the future of human-Luminari relations and, possibly the entire structure of galactic civilization. His simple act of rescuing a girl from a fire had started a chain of events that was now beyond his control. All he could do was trust that his students had learned enough about courage and conviction to make the choices that felt right to them, regardless of the consequences. Tomorrow would reveal whether he had succeeded in teaching them to think like humans, or whether the pressure of tradition would reassert itself and erase everything they had learned. The next morning, Marcus waited anxiously in his quarters while High Counselor Etherlyn conducted her private interviews with each student. Through his window, he could see embassy staff moving with unusual urgency, and he noticed several ships arriving that hadn't been there the night before. Ambassador Veltar appeared at his door just before noon, his expression unreadable. "How did it go?" Marcus asked immediately. "Better than I expected, but more complicated than I hoped," Veltar replied. All 12 students chose to continue the program. Marcus felt a surge of relief and pride. All of them? Every one. Even Thyron Vel, who I thought might waver under pressure. They've apparently internalized your teachings more deeply than anyone realized. Then, why do you look worried? Veltar gestured toward the window. Because their unanimous choice has forced Etherlyn to make a decision she wasn't prepared for. She can't dismiss this as a few misguided young people anymore. If they're all committed to this path, it suggests a fundamental shift in how our species might develop. Before Marcus could respond, his comm unit activated with an urgent message from the High Counselor herself, requesting his immediate presence in the main conference chamber. The chamber had been transformed since Marcus's last visit. What had once been an intimate meeting space now resembled a formal tribunal, with elevated seating for the visiting officials and a single chair in the center where Marcus was directed to sit. High Counselor Etherlyn presided over the gathering, flanked by her advisors and several other luminari that Marcus didn't recognize. Their skin patterns were formal and synchronized, creating an intimidating display of official authority. "Mr. Chan," Etherlyn began, "your students have presented me with an interesting dilemma. Despite significant pressure to conform to traditional expectations, they have unanimously chosen to continue your training program." "I'm pleased to hear that, High Counselor." "Are you?" "Because their choice has created a crisis that extends far beyond this embassy." One of her advisors activated a holographic display showing what appeared to be a galaxy-wide communication network. Dozens of species were represented by glowing nodes, with lines of communication flowing between them in complex patterns. "Word of your program has spread throughout galactic civilization," the advisor explained. "No fewer than 17 species have requested detailed information about human psychological training methods. 5 have formally petitioned the GAL.